accept racist practices, even if you don't think you're a racist. You live in a country that functions on racial capitalism. Like, why do you want to have a Muslim ban? Why do you want to limit immigration? Why do you want to strengthen the borders? Why do you want to make America great again? You want to ensure white dominance.
Hello, everybody. Guys, we got Noura Erakat here on an interview. I thought this was fascinating. She speaks about how racism and white imperialism essentially reverberates around the world. Let's check this out and we'll talk about it.
If you grow up in the United States, you are naturally socialized to obscure settler colonialism in a settler colony. Mm-hmm. You are naturally socialized to accept racist practices, even if you don't think you're a racist. You live in a country that functions on racial capitalism. You are naturally socialized to believe that capitalism has existed before this with the dinosaurs. Yeah. And that the earth is gonna blow up.
The cavemen were trading rocks,
right.
And they were getting
exactly.
capital.
This is what they were doing. Like you're just socialized to be a capitalist and to be a racist and to be a settler and then to be a Zionist, right? And so in my use of law.
You see that as an extension of those things?
100%. Oh, 100%. It's the same logics, right? It's the same logics of a racial supremacy, of a settler colonial ideology, of a form of militarism and violence, of an entitlement that no one earned, of a mythology of, logics of superiority. And so, but when I was using the law, I was speaking to audiences that might have understood this universalist language and using that as a framework to make an argument, but it was only one form of an argument to make.
I mean, we're speaking in the very early aftermath of a election, and the one that has really consumed so much oxygen this year. And I say that as somebody who is not American, who has still felt that you couldn't escape the gravity of what this conversation was about. And what it felt like it was about was that this is America, this great project, this beam of light and democracy and freedom in the world, fighting to defend itself from erosion or collapse. And here was this separate conversation of people on the streets, of people in these newsrooms trying to force people to have, which is that this whole thing is a lie. Like, this is not, this whole illusion about what not only the United States, but a lot of Western democracies are, is a lie if there is no space in this conversation for what is happening in Gaza. If there is no opportunity to talk about what this country, what this government, what these taxpayers are directly complicit in. How did it feel living through this year with this election, with these conversations, and with this essentially erasure of this issue that really in any other society should have been at the heart of what this election was about?
So they're talking about the genocide in Gaza against the Palestinian people and how this is not the number one focus of this past election. Just shows how far, honestly, behind how I talk about how racism and misogyny and attacks on immigrants, Palestinians, these kinds of things are becoming more and more normalized. In normal elections, we would be talking about this genocide. But you know what? What we were too concerned about? And the right wing has always been so good at making the conversation about what they want to DEI, woke, if Kamala is black, immigration and immigrants are poisoning the blood, or Haitians eating cats and dogs. Like, these were the hallmarks of our election. All racist garbage, all white imperialism, all about what it means to be American. And guys, when the right wing says that, who's an American, well, you know what they mean. Even if you're Black American, if you've been here for hundreds of years, they definitely see Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, any other American that's not white as less than, and not really American. We're seeing this, and it reverberates around the world. It's not only here.
You bring up a good point. I just want to wrap up the last question, which is to say the moment that I pivot away from that to speak in a very personal tone is the moment where I feel like all masks have been taken off. And at this point, let's just speak plainly about what it is, right? There was an expiration of the value of that kind of logic, because the truth is who am I talking to anymore? Because everything that I've been trying to tell you is now plain to see. It's so obvious. What is my role as an intermediary here? And so instead, I wanted to express who I am as a human and a Palestinian in the world, who is primarily trying to use everything that we have, every shred of energy, of work, of connection, of relationship, right, in order to stop this, right? And so there's something very similar that's happening when we get to the conversation about the election, which it just becomes exhausting, because there's a mythology of American exceptionalism that is really powerful. And it's the idea that the United States, unlike other, nation state projects, is exceptional for having a different kind of history of pulling itself up by its own bootstraps, of building an economy, of being the youngest state that's now global superpower, of having the moral authority in order to police the rest of the world, and so that international law depends on what it does, of actually being, having a constitution that promises a kind of utopia as long as we can reach the potential of the promise of that constitution, right? And that American exceptionalist framework is one that shapes a lot of conversations. So that if you speak in that language, there's room for you, because you're saying, I believe in this. I believe in this narrative that you say. But if you step outside of that frame and say, this entire story is a myth and it's wrong, and we live in a colonial and a settler colonial reality, and this is a white settler colony, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect point. Especially, right, Republicans like to say, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. That's what America is about. No, this country was savagely ripped apart from Native Americans. And then Africans were enslaved and brought over here by force. That's what built this nation. It wasn't this exceptionalism and this moral, values that this country was just inherently had. And think about the things we're talking about now with Panama and trying to take the canal. At what point do we just keep taking and taking from the world? And what does that mean? And we're in this country, right? I think a lot of us do feel powerless, right? We're fighting these social issues. We're still trying to get equal opportunities in job employments and placements in powers, like in Congress. Right? I think a lot of us feel powerless. And I think this is why it's important for Black Americans, Hispanics, Middle Eastern, all people of color, and the white people that believe in these values as well, to stick together. And we have to fight. Look how hard, how vicious and visceral the right wing fights for their white nationalism. We need to match. We need to be more ruthless. We need to be more relentless.
Then you are not going to be able to speak at all. And we see that split obviously in our communities today, but we also see it in the struggle for Black freedom, right? Where Black freedom struggle has had many different strands. One of them happens to be a civil rights kind of approach of let's meet the promise of the United States, and another one is we can't be free at all unless the U.S. doesn't continue to be an imperial power. Because we're connected. Our lives are connected to the lives of all racialized people elsewhere. What does that have to do with the election? Well, during the election, I think because of the way that the U.S. as empire is obscured, right? And the U.S. as colony, settler colony, is obscured, there was a tendency to split what's happening in Palestine versus what's happening in the United States. There was an expectation that what's genocide can continue in Palestine and the US can continue on its own trajectory as if it was not related to this geography, right? There was this almost blinders that continued that the US can continue to be as rich as it is, right? There's jobs here. That's why people come here. There's jobs here. Like you're gonna get vaccinated here first and so on and so forth. How come? Why? And not making the connection of the US as empire as extractive, right? It's that obfuscation that happens where we can continue to feed ourselves the myth that the US can develop on its own without relationship to what it's doing abroad in order to enrich itself, right? And so that became and that became, with our allies, it became an incredibly difficult place. Like you just can't have that conversation with liberals, period. Right, period, because there isn't an analysis there. There isn't. But even with our progressive allies who do have an understanding of that relationship, but who couldn't see with us that whatever is happening in the United States is a reflection of what it's doing abroad. In order to understand, for example, US police violence and its militarization, you can't understand that without understanding the US in the Philippines, right? And the US in Puerto Rico, and then the US in Vietnam, right? And the US in Korea. You're not gonna understand white supremacy and violence here if you don't understand what's happening in Palestine. That there is being nurtured a supremacist movement of a racialized minority, like Jews as a racialized minority, who are seeking the mantle of having their own state where they govern it and are able to engineer population where they get to be the majority by any means necessary and obfuscate a settler reality, right? And say that this is in the name of our sovereignty, right? And then critique us, that if we said anything about Zionism, then suddenly that was an attack on Jewish people. How do you expect to defend that position and not have white people in the United States not echo that same sentiment? Like Richard Spencer, who says that Israel is the future of European sovereignty.
Yeah, he astutely described it as a white ethno-national state, which is, I think was...
But that's what everybody's saying. Like, why do you want to have a Muslim ban? Why do you want to limit immigration? Why do you want to strengthen the borders? Why do you want to make America great again?
Why do you attack DI? Which is, again, when Republicans say this, 95% of the time they mean a black person, right? They call Kamala Harris a DEI pick, or they see a black person in a prominent position, mayor, that's a DEI hire, that's a DEI this. Again, constantly trying to notch down people of color, especially black Americans in this country. Same thing with saying about immigrants. They're eating cats and dogs. They are poisoning the blood of the nation, calling Haitian and African nations shithole countries. Think about this. Do we all see the denominator here? It's white nationalism. It's white imperialism. It's the idea that genetically, culturally, right, more genetically than anything, whites are up here and all of us, people of color, are down here somewhere. This is a view of that they have. And you've heard them spout it here and there. Even idiots like PBD, who's a person of color. This is how dangerous this kind of ideology is.
Want to ensure white dominance. How do you think that happens? How do you think that wasn't going to happen when the entire liberal strata was normalizing that position and saying that it was in the name of human rights, and then mobilizing police, media, cultural institutions, universities, government, all to protect that position, and still expect that we were somehow gonna continue? It just, the expectation that you can separate the what we would call the metropole of an empire from its colonial periphery and what happens there is unfounded, short-sighted, and has brought us to this moment where we can't even properly diagnose what the problem is. And people want to point fingers at, but who did you vote for? And how could we have stopped it? The only way to properly stop this is to actually take responsibility, to account for our imperial privilege, and to stop it, and to end it. There was only one way that we're going to begin to account. And the only way to get to, for people to understand Palestine is also for us to understand that we have to be continuously in struggle against anti-Blackness and continuously in struggle against settler expansion on these lands, which is ongoing every single day. So that's a message to my own siblings, right? My Palestinian siblings, my Arab American siblings, that it's not just the shortcomings of others who can't see us, but our failure to be able to identify where we are and how we're participating in a project that's imperial and that's racist will also be insufficient. There's no nationalist road to Palestinian liberation. It has to be an anti-imperialist position that we take that leads us to our liberation. And it happens every day, and not only what we're doing and how we, protest how our taxes are used and what's done in our name and how the veto is used, but also what's happening in our daily lives around us.
That takes me...
I'm going to leave it there, but she's completely right. And this is why I say Hispanics, Black Americans, Middle East, we all people of color, and the white people that believe in this, we have to stick together. We have to. You have to understand that the struggles of the immigrants coming across the border that may have my skin color, and how Black Americans are treated here, and how Palestinians are treated in Gaza, these are all one and the same. They share this denominator, which is white imperialism, white nationalism, of keeping these people out, demonizing them, keeping them in a lower notch, right? But I'm going to leave it there, guys. We have to be vigilant. We have to fight. We need leaders that are not only charismatic, but fighters. This is why I like Jasmine Crockett. She not only has the knowledge base, but she has that fight in her. But I'm going to leave it there, guys. I thought this interview was fascinating, and the connection she's made to white imperialism, how all of this is all connected. And we live in a nation. It's a white colonized nation, right? And even if we succeed here, we're succeeding on the backs of colonialism, of white colonizers. But my belief is we can change that, right? The history of this nation is horrible, but maybe we could change the future of it. And inevitably the future of the world. But I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you for watching. If you got all the way to the end, please subscribe. Please comment. I read just about all the comments. And I'll catch you in the next one.